These next few graphs visualize the result of our group's survey. We received nearly 100 responses in 24 hours, and now we'll be analyzing them. As you can see, the majority of our responses were from females. This was to be expected, however, because there are more females than males in the field of social work. Next, it is important to note the large number of respondents who were white. However, these proportions mimic the current racial makeup of Indiana University, which was to be expected since we polled primarily IU students. We discovered that nearly 2/3 of respondents hadn't yet heard of the prison industrial complex. This was high, but we weren't too surprised by this number. In fact, we were pleased that nearly 1/3 of respondents were aware of this idea and this topic. After our presentation, we hope to obviously increase this number even higher. The next question we asked was, in general, how do you feel about sending people to jail? And we received responses ranging from, yes, lock everyone away, they committed a crime and should pay the time, to, terribly, it is ineffective and people leave as better criminals, money should be sent elsewhere, and locking people away does not solve away any problems. For our next question, do you feel certain laws unfairly target certain populations based on race, class, or socioeconomic status? Over 4 out of every respondents felt that they did, either selecting yes or kind of. Over half then went on to say drug laws themselves were a specific set of laws that were very discriminatory because they target people based on race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. Lastly, regarding what would be the most effective at reducing mass incarceration, the 2 runaway answers were, quote, changing or ending sentencing related to nonviolent drug offenses with a 40% selection rate, and, quote, offering rehabilitation or training programs for those convicted with the goal of providing resources in order to decrease the repeat rates of offending at 30%.
The United States has 25% of the world's prisoners while only having 5% of the world's population.
Mass incarceration is a modern phenomenon particularly prevalent in the United States where people are incarcerated disproportionately to the population. Now we will read a personal story by one of New Leaf New Life's employees, Marilyn Dallas.
I was incarcerated. I got incarcerated at an older age. I got addicted to Oxycontin and then started using heroin, and I owned a business and lost everything. I learned a lot from being incarcerated. It showed me a lot because, I have to tell you, before I was incarcerated, I was very judgmental. Of course, I'm in social work now, so that changes you a lot too. But I owned a business, everything was, and then I got addicted. But before that, I always thought people just got arrested because they were bad, all the different things that people think. And then once I was incarcerated, I realized I'm really not a bad person. I'm not criminally minded. I had never had any intentions of breaking the law. I was an addict was what I was. But they changed my addiction into a crime, so therefore I became a criminal, and I was incarcerated. Now I've even got a better perspective from being here because I see people who have been incarcerated. Your judgments start breaking away because you realize that all the things that you thought were true are not true. This is just human life.
Drugs are one of the leading causes of mass incarceration. Roughly half of the incarcerated people in federal prisons are serving time for nonviolent drug-related crimes. The war on drugs was initiated in 1971 as a way to discourage drug use by criminalizing its usage. Since its implementation, roughly $1.5 trillion have been spent, and the incarceration rate in the United States has grown up exponentially. The results? Evidence has consistently shown that drug usage has not declined. In actuality, drug usage has remained remarkably stable, and the United States has incredibly high rates of addiction compared to other nations. You can't fix an addiction with punishment. People need treatment. In other words of Marilyn Dallas, this war on drugs turned out to be war on people.
Race is a major factor that plays into mass incarceration. An African-American male has a 1 in 3 chance of becoming incarcerated compared to a 1 in 17 chance for white men. The difference in sentencing for certain drugs is an explanation of this. President Barack Obama signed into law an act that reduced the sentencing disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1. While this is still unfair, it is still a step in the right direction. It becomes a race issue because crack cocaine is more commonly found in low-income African-American communities. Thus, African Americans are going to jail for having less of the same drug than their white counterparts.
We will now be discussing those on the far end of the socioeconomic status spectrum, the homeless, and recent efforts by cities to criminalize those without a place to live, even if there isn't enough space in homeless shelters. Referring to specific laws, 91% of cities have legislation that prohibit camping either across the city or in particular places within the city. Additionally, 45% of them ban sleeping in public or in particular areas, typically parks, and 43% prohibit sleeping in vehicles on city property. Unfortunately, the only option we give those without a home who don't have shelter space is to lock them away. This is supported by data, since inmates who have been homeless make up 15.3% of the U.S. jail population compared to homeless, which account currently for about 1.75% of the general U.S. adult population. In comparison with other inmates, those who have been homeless were more likely to have mental health and substance abuse problems, be less educated, and also to be previously unemployed.
Place now.
So I think it's important just to keep in context the way in which I look at mass incarceration. So I'm in Black Studies, right? And so I use that lens to critique and interrogate mass incarceration. So for me, the way in which I look at the laws that are implemented is from a racial standpoint, right? So I'm looking at systemic racism, right? I'm looking at the way in which these laws just uphold a system of racism. And so a lot of trying to rehash or reform, right, the criminal justice system has to do with doing away with a lot of racist practices that are embedded within a system that disproportionately affect minority communities, right? And so it's not just a matter of rewriting a law, right? It's actually understanding the way in which this law feeds into other laws, right? Or understanding the way in which this law uses political coded language that, you know what I'm saying, speaks to this particular community, right? So being able to weed those things out and having people at the table who are able to call out.
Thank you for watching our video. If you'd like to learn more on mass incarceration, please check out the following events.